Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had a resignation now. It seems to be the big news of the day of a cabinet member of the Trump administration. And it's interesting to have seen this indivisible movement arise. Daily Signal points out ties to George Soros, sows division against Trump, GOP lawmakers. Democrats who used to work on Capitol Hill are helping to disrupt Republican lawmakers' town hall meetings across the country through a nationwide effort to oppose and resist President Donald Trump's agenda. And goes on to talk about some of the leftists trying to do that. And another article that says that the group is trying to, the Indivisible team is trying to mimic strategies of the Tea Party, but there's quite a difference. The taxed enough already party was grabbing hold of American principles, constitutional principles, principles that brought about the revolution and served the country well for over 200 years, and that is that we're supposed to have a government that works for us, not works us, takes away our religious freedom, tries to take away Second Amendment freedom, tries to take away freedom of religion, tells us we can't say anything negative about anything they care about, or they'll try to destroy us, our business. And there were people that were shocked that, and on top of it all, add a lot more tax. And as the president told Joe the plumber, in essence, you know, we need to take your income and spread it around the country. And I couldn't help but think, as had some friends here during the inauguration that went to took them to the Lincoln Memorial. And of course, on the south inside wall is the Gettysburg Address. On the inside of the north wall is the second inaugural that's so profound. And Mark Levin's father has a terrific book about it. But what an amazing speech. Lincoln is talking just shortly before his assassination. But second inaugural. The war is winding down. It's about over. And there's so much hope abounding. He was not bitter. He was an amazing man, our first Republican president. And he talked about the nation and about how both the North and South both read the same Bible, both pray to the same God. And he points out, you know, that the prayers of both could not be answered. The prayers of neither have been fully answered. But he points out that it might seem strange that a group of people would invoke God's name to wrench their bread out of the sweat of other people's brow. But I heard enough from people in the taxed enough already party that this group that arose, that wait a minute, basically they're saying we want, when the president says, I'm going to take your money that you made and spread it around, it's basically saying, look, I'm going to be the most powerful man in the world and certainly in this country, and my principles dictate I need to take what you work for and spread it around to other people. Is that a way of wrenching your bread from the sweat of others? Oh, it's interesting. But anyway, this group, we had 17 show up at an office. Obviously, they were more interested in publicity than a meeting, because all they have to do is call and we make sure they have a meeting. Somebody's there to meet them, even though I'm here in Washington when they demand to meet. But apparently, groups all over the country are following this Soros-funded effort to try to destroy the country, disrupt the country, create anarchy and mayhem wherever you can. Fortunately, in East Texas, people realize we can't quite go far as some groups do because nobody would accept it. And I've got some constituents that are asking legitimate questions. But what we go back to is what really gave strength to this movement objecting to what was being done in the Obama administration was when we had a president and a speaker who were saying, we know that a majority of Americans don't want this Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. It's hard to call it Affordable Care because it's such a misnomer, but we see the polls. Majority of American people don't want it, but we're going to stick you with it anyway because it's part of our agenda. And that's what was really bothering people. The thing that this so-called Indivisible and groups like this are terrific at coming up with names that are anathema to what they really are. So you have a group called Indivisible, and their goal is completely dividing and destroying constitutional principles of America. But the thing is, a majority didn't want Obamacare passed. It was shoved down their throats, even though most of the people in this body here had not even read it. I'd read it. It scared me. I'm still asking for answers. Why did President Obama need a commissioned and non-commissioned presidential officer corps that he could call up? Initially, it sounded like a medical emergency group, but then it said they would be trained. It didn't say with weapons or with what, and said president would be able to call them up for any international emergency, and didn't mention the word health or medical on that. So anyway, there's just so much in there that we didn't need. And most of Americans didn't want it, didn't like it. And it took away people's health insurance from them. I was talking with thousands of people in my district. I love to do telephone town halls with my district. And this was one segment. About a third of the district last night was represented in this group. And I'll have others coming up. But it's very helpful to me because I can talk to people that you wouldn't see, you wouldn't hear, wouldn't see or hear you if you had 40 people come to a town hall like sometimes do. And since we know that there are groups out there that have instructions, create mayhem, disrupt, accuse them of racism, it's in the documents that we're seeing. Don't let anybody, whatever they bring up, charge racism, corruption, something else. But so we can have a telephone town hall, and I can find out what people are thinking that I otherwise wouldn't hear from. I thought about doing a mailer to mail to as many of my district as I could, but the costs were just so dramatic. I could do it, but why spend, 100,000 plus of taxpayer dollars just to find out what my district's thinking? I think the best indication of what people in each congressional district in the country are thinking is what happened in the November election. That's the ultimate poll that anybody could ever take. And I've been talking about for 6 years that Obamacare needed to be repealed, that it takes away choice, it's costing more money, you don't get to keep your doctor, you don't get to keep your insurance policy, and so many thousands and thousands in my district did not. And so it's very helpful to hear from people how many, for example, how many believe the government needs to be more involved in health insurance. And I think that was like a 97%. There were thousands of people that had been called. But anyway, it gives me feedback. But it was interesting to note that to this group, this Indivisible group, the website, gotten some information about the messages going back and forth. And one of them is, when we demand that they have a town hall that we can disrupt, and they say we're going to have a telephone town hall because we can reach a lot more people, and people that are invalid or homebound, seniors that couldn't get out to a personal town hall meeting can participate in the telephone town hall. They're saying, how do we respond to that when there's so many more people they can reach and hear from, and it helps the disabled to do these telephones? How do we respond to that? And they didn't really get a good answer last I saw. But it is important for every representative to know where their district stands, where their people stand, and I continue to believe I'm the most fortunate member of this 435-seat body because of who I get to represent. And had an opponent last year raising Cain about I was on national media so much. And, I mean, when I think about it, why would national media want me to be on? It's certainly not my looks. Certainly not because I have such an incredible voice. You know, I would love to have a voice like James Earl Jones, or I was just so moved at our Senate chaplain speaking at the President Prayer Breakfast a couple of weeks ago. I'd love to have a voice like I think maybe God's voice may sound like someday when I get to hear it, but I don't. A voice like that, this is what I got. Don't put on any airs. Why would any national media want to have me on? And I think it would have to have something to do with the fact that I represent extraordinary people in Texas where sense is very common, just so much common sense, and I think a lot of the country like hearing about the way 3/4 of my district thinks. I think I reflect that district, and that's why basically 3/4 of the district voted for me. It's not because of the way I look or sound. Even people that can't stand me in that 25 or 6%, they know I'm going to stand up and do what I've told people I'm going to do. It's just that some people don't like it. Some years back, one guy wrote that I was a moron and misspelled moron. If he's listening, Mr. Speaker, he needs to know there's no E in moron. But in any event, it's interesting to see how frantic things have gotten and how destructive some of the forces in this country have gotten in trying to bring down the principles that made us great. And it's quite disconcerting. And that leads me to a point I want to discuss. Of course, we had the news, the tragic failing of the dam in California. We will continue, those of us who believe in the power of prayer, to pray that there will be no loss of life. Despite the negligence of the California government in refusing for over 12 years, apparently at least 12 years, to heed the warnings that this dam was going to be failing at some point. They needed to do something. We just need to pray that the negligence that occurred in the New Orleans area in diverting money away from shoring up the levee would not end up having the mass cost of loss of life in California. But as we continue to have people try to disrupt our congressional districts, continue to try to make so much noise, create so much anarchy that it creates an inability to govern properly, despite the fact it isn't going to work. This president, this administration, and this Congress is not going to be diverted from what needs to be done. But this article that came out today from the Free Beacon by Adam Credo, former Obama officials, loyalists waged secret campaign to oust Flynn. Now, I hadn't known Flynn before. I don't believe I'd met him before maybe last September. Might have, but I don't believe I had before that. But had a chance to visit with him at that point at that time, Donald Trump, now our president. He's an interesting man. He has served his country well. But there are issues that are coming out now about discussions with Russians. And it would seem if President Trump had an intelligence community and had people in the government service around him, the career people, that were really wanting to help the country rather than the Democrats or President Obama as he went out. If they were really interested in helping the best interests of the United States of America, they would want the president to have all of the information that anyone in any of the upper echelons of or anywhere in the departments that work for President Trump. Wouldn't they want their boss to know and have the most accurate information? And apparently there was information out there that didn't come to light until President Trump had selected his national security advisor. He had been sworn in as the national security advisor, and they're on a roll. And, of course, one of the things General Flynn was concerned about, something that's a deep concern of so many of ours in this body, was the outrageous Iran treaty that got treated like it wasn't a treaty. It was indeed a treaty. It never got ratified by the Senate, but it was indeed a treaty. It had all the things in it that treaties would have. But this article goes on. The abrupt resignation Friday evening of White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is the culmination of a secret months-long campaign by former Obama administration confidants to handicap President Donald Trump's national security apparatus and preserve the nuclear deal with Iran. According to multiple sources in and out of the White House who described to the Beacon a behind-the-scenes effort by these officials to plant a series of damaging stories about Flynn in the national media. The effort, said to include former Obama administration advisor Ben Rhodes, the architect of a separate White House effort to create what he described as a pro-Iran echo chamber, included a small task force of Obama loyalists who deluged media outlets with stories aimed at eroding Flynn's credibility, multiple sources revealed. The operation primarily focused on discrediting Flynn, an opponent of the Iran nuclear deal, in order to handicap the Trump administration's efforts to disclose secret details of the nuclear deal with Iran that had been long hidden by the Obama administration. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to insert here, some of us went down to the classified area of the SCIF where we can review classified information, and we reviewed what was available about the Iran deal, but we found out there was a lot of secret stuff that the administration would not allow us to know. What he had given away, what he had done, potential bad judgment in to placate and assist the largest supporters of terrorism in the world. But and obviously what this article is talking about, some secret parts of the agreement, those are things that we were certainly not allowed to read, no matter who you were in Congress at the time. But this says, those familiar with the anti-Trump or anti-Flynn campaign told the Free Beacon that these Obama loyalists plotted in the months before Trump's inauguration to establish a set of roadblocks before Trump's national security team, which includes several prominent opponents of diplomacy with Iran. The Free Beacon first reported on this effort in January. Sources who spoke to the Free Beacon requested anonymity in order to speak freely about the situation and avoid interfering with the White House's official narrative about Flynn, which centers on his failure to adequately inform the president about a series of phone calls with Russian officials. Flynn took credit for his missteps regarding these phone calls in a brief statement released late Monday evening. Trump administration officials subsequently stated that Flynn's efforts to mislead the president, vice president about his contacts with Russia could not be tolerated. However, multiple sources closely involved in the situation pointed to a larger, more secretive campaign aimed at discrediting Flynn and undermining the Trump White House. Quote, "It's undeniable that the campaign to discredit Flynn was well underway before Inauguration Day, with a very troublesome and politicized series of leaks designed to undermine him," unquote, said one veteran national security advisor with close ties to the White House team. Quote, "This pattern reminds me of the lead up to the Iran deal and probably features the same cast of characters," unquote. And we know from news that has come out since the Iran deal was made by this administration, we know that some of the same placators that enabled North Korea to develop nuclear weapons in the Clinton administration were involved in negotiating this deal with Iran. The deal with North Korea was to stop them from getting nuclear weapons. And so my interpretation of the deal is basically this. They promised them, "We'll give you everything you need to develop nuclear weapons in North Korea if you'll just sign a piece of paper that says you won't do that." And so, boy, the Clinton administration, some of the same people that ran to do a deal with Iran, they jumped on that. And so what happens? North Korea uses what we provided them to help create nuclear weapons. Big shock. So is it a big shock that the Obama administration would send at least one of those original people to be the top negotiator with Secretary of State John Kerry, who never saw a Genghis Khan that he couldn't work with, and they work out a deal, and we still haven't found out all of the arrangements, all the things that are done, but we know that there's apparently something so sinister about what this country has done, bent over backwards to provide for Iran or allow Iran to do, that the Obama administration could not allow right-thinking American people to know what it had done for Iran and against Israel and the United States' best interests. But if you believe the best interests of the United States are to weaken the United States, if you believe that the United States has been the biggest problem in the world for the last 100 years, then you would think, well, then if we make a deal with Iran that weakens the United States, may even lead to our demise, the world's a better place. So it's ultimately for the good of the world, because the United States is certainly weaker than it's been in decades. Going back to pre-World War II military strength, the Chinese economy, it was announced at one point they may have exceeded ours. I'm not sure that was true, but anyway, countries around the world that are threats to world peace have gotten stronger. ISIS has gotten stronger during this president's term. In fact, came into being under this President Obama and got quite strong, thousands upon thousands of lives lost. In Afghanistan, he took a war that he told people, the voters, in 2008 was the important war, and what should have been just a housekeeping operation under his leadership and with his rules of engagement cost about 4 times more American military lives than were lost in the height of the Afghan war for 7.5 years under President Bush. Must be something in the leadership there. When one president loses 4 times more military members than the prior president, it's about the same length of time, and the latter president being when the war was supposed to be basically over. But this article points out that Flynn had been preparing to publicize many of the details about the Iran nuclear deal that had been intentionally hidden by the Obama administration as part of its effort to garner support for the deal, these sources say. Flynn is now, quote, gone before anybody can see what happened, unquote, with these secret agreements, said the second insider close to Flynn in the White House. Sources out of the White House are concerned that the campaign against Flynn will be extended to other prominent figures in the Trump administration. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can inject here, whoever these sources are that are concerned the campaign against Flynn will be extended to other prominent figures. I can guarantee them that people in and outside the United States government right now as I speak will do everything within their power, some of these characters will, to prevent President Trump from getting us back on track, to making the world a safer place, to getting Iran back in the little box that President Carter let them out of. And they're going to go after lots of people. It's not going to be limited. This apparently is a campaign that's going to be ongoing. Apparently General Flynn messed up and wasn't completely honest when he should have been. A president's got to be able to trust his security advisor. That's kind of goes without saying, but president's got to be able to trust those people. And it takes me back to September when I was talking, and it was right before General Flynn walked up, actually ironically, but I was telling him, look, I like President George W. Bush. He's a good man. He's a smart guy. He's a lot smarter than people give him credit. He's one of the wittiest people you can ever have a conversation with. But something that hurt him, and I wanted Donald Trump to understand this, something that hurt him was that he was such a nice guy. After the election was over, he made it known, in essence, everything that happened in the past is bygones. What's happening now is from now on, we're going forward. The trouble is, he had people doing bad acts, even crimes, like having FBI files at the White House. Chuck Colson went to prison 1.5 years for having one. The Clinton administration had nearly 1,000. Nobody did a day. And I said, you've got to clean out these departments, these agencies, where Bush didn't clean them out. You've got to, or they're going to undermine you the whole time you're president. And it looks like we're seeing that right now. So, Mr. Speaker, I just encourage all my colleagues, let's give the Trump administration the chance to help get this country safer, freer, and just a better place to live. And it's not going to happen while people are undermining the president from within his own administration and a little cabal that has those ties in this administration. It's time to clean house, and General Flynn's not who I'm talking about. And with that,